Have you ever noticed something change in her behavior, suddenly, and you couldn't quite explain it? Nothing dramatic happened, no big argument, no obvious mistake, but something feels off. She still shows up, still talks to you, still says everything is fine, yet her tone shifts. The warmth fades just a little. Conversations feel shorter, less engaged, almost mechanical. You catch moments where your words don't land the way they used to, or where your presence no longer seems to slow her down. And quietly, you start asking yourself a question you don't want to ask. When did this change? Most men are taught to dismiss that feeling. To assume noticing it means you're insecure, overthinking, or trying to control something that shouldn't be controlled. So you ignore it, you rationalize it, you wait. But what if that sudden shift isn't drama or paranoia, but information? What if respect doesn't disappear loudly, but slips away through small, almost invisible changes? This video won't tell you what to believe. It will help you see what may already be happening, more clearly than before. There is a moment in a relationship that is very hard to name. It is not loud, it is not dramatic, but it is enough to make you start feeling like you are standing slightly out of the place that used to be yours. She is still there, she still talks to you, she still replies to your messages, but something has pulled away quietly and quickly. The weight of your presence. It is not that she does not hear what you say, it is that your words no longer land the way they used to. You notice it in very small details. A suggestion that used to be taken seriously is now brushed past. A boundary that was once respected is now lightly tested. A decision that once included you is now made without asking. And what confuses many men is this. From the outside, everything still looks fine. No one cheated, no one is raising their voice. There is no clear proof strong enough to point at and say something is wrong. So you start turning inward and doubting yourself. Am I being too sensitive? Maybe I am just stressed and overthinking. A mature man should not get caught up in things like this. This is why so many men miss the most important stage in the breakdown of a relationship. The stage where respect begins to shift but has not disappeared yet. At this stage, doubt does not show up as jealousy. It shows up as a quiet discomfort. Subtle, persistent, and very easy to explain away with logic. But one thing needs to be said clearly: doubt, when it is not impulsive, not controlling, not interrogating, is not weakness. In many cases, it is a self-protective signal from awareness itself. Like the feeling that the ground beneath your feet is slightly off, even though you cannot yet see a crack. The problem is not the question. Does she still love you? The real question is more subtle. How is she starting to treat you differently? Femina mind is not here to collect evidence to accuse women. Femina mind does not encourage baseless suspicion. The perspective of Femina mind is this. Observe small behavioral changes that repeat over time, where respect does not vanish all at once, but fractures little by little. The most dangerous thing is not a single action. It is when a man constantly explains everything in a way that justifies staying while his own feelings are slowly pushed aside. You do not need to reach any conclusions at this point. You only need to be clear-headed enough to look. In the next part, we will begin to name the earliest signs. Not dramatic red flags, but very ordinary changes. So ordinary that many people only recognize them, after respect has already pulled too far away. If you have ever had the feeling that you are trying to hold on to something that is quietly slipping out of your hands, leave a short comment. I've felt this. The earliest signs of lost respect rarely arrive as a shock. They come quietly, in fragments, and they feel reasonable enough for you to overlook. But when you place them side by side over time, they form a pattern, and patterns are what need to be faced directly. Sign 1. Tone shift. a change in tone. The way she talks becomes shorter, less emotional, sometimes slightly condescending or lightly sarcastic. Sentences that once carried warmth now sound purely functional. Question and answer, right and wrong, allowed or not. When respect is present, people naturally adjust their tone to maintain connection. When respect declines, that impulse weakens. Not because she is trying to hurt you, but because the drive to regulate emotional rhythm is no longer as strong. Explaining everything away as stress, work pressure, or mood. You may be right in each individual moment, but wrong in the overall picture because you ignore repetition. How to respond the Femina mind way. Do not confront, do not react emotionally. Simply observe whether the shift is consistent over time and whether you are still being treated with the same level of respect as before. Comment noticed if you have ever felt this change in tone. Sign 2. Public versus private gap. Different when alone. Around other people, she seems fine, polite, gentle, even complimentary toward you. But when it is just the two of you, the atmosphere feels colder, more distant, and less patient. When respect turns into a social image rather than an internal feeling, it only switches on when there is an audience. This does not mean she is fake. It shows that the private connection is weakening. Comforting yourself with, "At least she is still nice to me in public." But relationships do not live on a stage. They live in moments when no one is watching. Evaluate the relationship based on how she treats you when there is nothing to perform. Lower emotional investment, stay steady, and observe whether the gap closes or continues to widen. If this sign made you pause, leave a like. Sign 3. Boundary testing, pushing limits. Being late more often, small broken promises, saying mildly irritating things and waiting for your reaction. Not direct insults, but gentle pressure on the boundary. When respect declines, people tend to test. How protected is this man's value? This is not manipulation. It is a very natural social reflex. Laughing it off to keep the peace. Over-explaining to prove you are easygoing. Without realizing it, you teach others that your boundaries are flexible. The Femina mind response. No anger, no lectures. Simply adjust your level of presence. Less availability, less compensating. Boundaries are communicated through behavior, not speeches. Does this pattern feel familiar? Comment a single if you have seen it before. Sign 4. Effort asymmetry. Uneven investment. You text first, you plan, you repair. You carry the rhythm. She agrees, but rarely initiates. When respect fades, the responsibility of maintaining the relationship is often silently transferred to the person who is still trying. This imbalance creates exhaustion, and exhaustion clouds judgment, believing that love simply means trying a little harder. But one-sided effort does not create connection. It only extends imbalance. Stop compensating. Step back one beat. Observe what happens when you are no longer the one carrying the emotional rhythm. At Femina Mind, we see these signs as data, not verdicts. They do not force you to conclude anything. They help you stay clear-minded and maintain self-respect before things fully break apart. Right now, you might feel a quiet kind of confusion. Not alarmed, not certain, just unsettled. A sense that something has shifted, but not enough to point to one clear moment and say, "That's it." And somewhere in that uncertainty, you may be questioning whether you're simply overthinking. That hesitation makes sense, because what you're noticing doesn't look dramatic on the surface. Each moment taken alone feels explainable, manageable, easy to dismiss. But relationships rarely change because of one obvious action. What actually matters is the overall rhythm. Like a room where the temperature rises slowly, you don't panic, you just feel a little more uncomfortable over time. Or a steering wheel turned only a few degrees off center. The road still feels smooth, yet you're no longer headed where you thought. Sometimes it's nothing more than a constant background noise, never loud enough to demand attention, but persistent enough to wear you down. The important detail isn't how patient you've been, it's how often you've had to talk yourself into being okay. When someone repeatedly has to reassure themselves, reinterpret tone, or soften their own reactions just to keep the peace, that pattern itself carries information. And from here on, the shift becomes harder to ignore. The patterns ahead aren't subtle misunderstandings anymore. This is where many people begin adjusting themselves, quietly, gradually, until they no longer recognize where their boundaries went. If this feels familiar, stay with me for the next part. At this stage, what makes the relationship dangerous is no longer the external behavior itself. It lies in the way you begin to explain those behaviors to yourself. The deeper patterns are not loud. They quietly reshape a man's inner compass, slowly blurring his ability to tell the difference between patience and self-erasure. Sign 5. Casual disregard. Subtle dismissal. Accidental jokes about you in front of other people. Comparisons that seem harmless on the surface. Or moments when your emotions are dismissed entirely. You are too sensitive. It is not a big deal. You are overthinking. Because each instance is not big enough to justify a reaction, but it is small enough that you swallow it. The real danger is not the comment itself. It is that you begin to doubt your own perception. Like a small crack in a windshield. By itself, it does not stop the car, but every vibration that follows makes it spread. Asking yourself, am I being too sensitive? And then, to avoid conflict, shrinking your reaction just a little more. Sign 6. Emotional withdrawal loop. The pullback cycle. She shares less, responds with less emotion. When you open up, what comes back is silence, a change of subject, or something flat and minimal. When respect declines, people stop investing in emotional connection. Not because they are cruel, but because their motivation has shifted. You feel the distance. And to compensate, you open up more, explain more, try to say things the right way. But the more you try, the more you feel alone inside the relationship. It is like speaking to someone standing behind a door that is slightly closed. You can hear them, but they never fully step out. Believing that if you are sincere enough, patient enough, things will return to how they were. In reality, connection cannot be pulled from one side alone. Sign 7. Self-doubt rationalization. Explaining away the hurt. This is the quietest climax of all. You no longer ask, is this okay for me? You ask, how should I understand her better? Every uneasy feeling gets wrapped in reasonable explanations. Every cut is relabeled as maturity. It is not that she changed. It is that you became the one defending your own disregard. Your compass begins to drift. The warning light has been on for a long time, but you have grown used to the red glow. At this point, many men are no longer angry. They are just tired. And that exhaustion keeps them staying longer than they should. If you are at this stage, one thing needs to be said clearly. You are not alone. Many men have stood right here, caught between moving forward and admitting that they have drifted too far from themselves. And this is where the most important question begins to form. Not, what is she doing? But, what am I giving up to keep this relationship? That question leads us to the final sign, a sign that does not live in her behavior, but entirely in you. Final sign, you start explaining yourself. When you begin to justify yourself. There is a very thin line between patience and self-erasure, and that line is usually crossed at this exact moment, when you start explaining yourself in order to be respected. You explain your intentions. You explain why you said what you said. You explain that you did not mean to hurt, control, or demand anything. Not because you're wrong, but because you feel that if you do not explain, you might lose her. This is the strongest sign of all. Not because it is dramatic, but because it shows that the center of gravity has completely shifted. When a woman truly respects you, you do not need to prove that your feelings are reasonable. Your presence alone carries weight. But when respect pulls away, you begin negotiating for things that once came by default. You no longer ask, "Is this okay for me?" You ask instead, "How should I say this so she does not get uncomfortable? How much should I adjust? Should I try a little harder?" And here is the most important mindset shift of this entire video. Trying a little harder is not always love. Sometimes it is simply the fear of being replaced. Femina mind does not teach you to leave someone with bitterness. It also does not teach you to keep someone through control or tactics. Femina mind is a framework that helps you recognize the moment you begin shrinking yourself and have enough self-respect to stop walking down that path. Self-respect is not about threatening to leave. It is about knowing when to stop explaining yourself and letting your behavior speak instead. When you step back at the right time, two things can happen, and both are necessary truths. Either the relationship self-corrects because respect returns when you stop lowering your own value, or it does not. And you realize that what you have been holding onto is no longer a balanced relationship. Both outcomes move you out of the passive role. At this point, Femina mind appears not as advice, but as a clear reminder. Femina mind does not teach you how to keep a woman. Femina mind teaches you not to lose yourself to keep anyone. No demonizing women, no turning men into victims, just returning to you the right to respect your own inner experience. And before this video ends, ask yourself one question, slowly. If you have to shrink yourself in order to stay, is that still love? Or is it simply the fear of not being chosen? If this question touched something in you, leave a comment. And if you want to continue exploring these dynamics with clarity without bitterness, subscribe to Femina Mind. Not as a way to control anyone, but as a journey of self-respect. At this point, you may realize that the issue was never really about whether she was right or wrong. It was never about who changed first. What matters more is this. Throughout that entire process, did you remain grounded in respect for yourself or not? Once that respect begins to wobble, every other answer becomes secondary. We are often taught that if we just try a little harder, it will be enough. More patience, more understanding, more sacrifice. But not every relationship needs to be held together by effort alone. There are moments when walking away is not giving up. But the first time you face the truth without lying to yourself, that is not failure. It is final clarity when every justification has run dry. Femina mind does not exist to tell you how to keep or lose a woman. Femina mind is an observational framework, one that helps you step back and see the forces beneath your emotions more clearly. It is a way to stay calm when everything feels tangled, so you do not react in panic or erase yourself in the process. And at its deepest level, Femina mind is a compass of self-respect, reminding you that your value is not measured by how someone treats you, but by what you allow to exist in your life. So ask yourself, without needing an immediate answer, are you staying because there is real connection, or because you are afraid to admit that you are no longer being valued? And if you did not have to prove anything to anyone, what would you choose for yourself? If you want to, share your experience in the comments. Not to be judged, but simply to be heard. And if you feel that you need a place that helps you keep that clarity, Femina Mind is still here. Not to lead you anywhere, only to walk alongside you as you decide your own path.